but you can do some wonderful little things here with this tool. Also under image and adjustments, you have hue and saturation. What this does, it just changes the hue. Again, if you've selected a particular area, it'll just work on the area you've selected. You can change the color of all kinds of things with that. Same with saturation, all the way to black and white or to way saturated. And lightness and darkness is pretty self-explanatory. Lightness, dark this way, lighter this way. That will take you wherever you need to go there. I think, let's see here, replace color, and some of these things match color and all this get pretty complex. I'm not going to get into that with you right now. We're not going to mess up with that. Something like exposure here, what this does, same general sort of thing, lightens it or darkens it. Trying to compensate for your camera, for correcting what would have and could have been done differently in a camera. But that's what that will do for you, very basically. Invert will actually turn it into a photo negative, just like the old days when we used to use film. You could get a negative. Equalize threshold, posterize is an effect. If you click on that, you can change the levels of it, and it'll do different things, from extremes to not extremes. That's what that will do. You can come down and duplicate all of these here. I'm not going to worry about right now. The image size, you can change the size of your image right here. As you get to be familiar with what pixels are and resolution, you'll start to understand this a little better. But here's where you can change the size of your image. Canvas size. Imagine this. Imagine this picture is sitting on a piece of paper, and the canvas size is just going to change the size of the piece of the paper, not the image. So if you make it larger, you'll see the edges hanging out around the outside. And then you can rotate the canvas right here. Trim, crop, you can do all of these different things. Layers, we have a whole tutorial on the basics of layers, so I'm not going to get into that, but here's your layers palette, or different things you can do with the layer that's chosen. But I'm not going to explain layers right now. We do have a tutorial about layers available. Selection, remember how we talked earlier about selecting this? Here's how you can modify some different things. Let's say I chose to select her skin right here, and I wanted to modify that selection. I can let it grow. It'll select the larger area. See how that got larger? All of this, and I can actually make it shrink. I can modify. I can increase the border around there, smooth out the edges of the selected area, expand the selected area by a certain number of pixels, contract it. I can do lots of different things with that tool right there. It modifies your selected area, is what that does. Your filters are fun. This is pretty much the first thing everybody likes to play around with when you first get to Photoshop. When you first get to Photoshop, you're going to jump in filters, and you look at this and go, wow, some of these are pretty fun. What is this? Extract, filter, gallery, all of these things. You're not going to want to mess with these right off the bat. Here's the fun stuff. Artistic. You get to things like film grain, make the film look really grainy, poster edges, sponge, and you can familiar yourself with each of these. But they're all going to give you an entirely different effect. Blurring the image. Here's where you make an image blurrier if you want to make it blurrier. Brush strokes. These are kind of fun. You can choose the different types of brush strokes by that. It's as if the picture was painted. You see how that works? It looks like the picture was painted, and you have some over here. You have the direction of the brushes, the stroke length. You get to adjust all of these different little aspects here. The sharpness of the image, whatever you'd like as far as that goes. And they have also up here comes a little palette that's going to give you some different options. You can click on them and see if you like them. You can see in the main image here whether or not you like them, whatever you like. Those are all different options for you, and filters. Filters is a lot of fun. Distort, diffuse glow. You're going to have to familiarize yourself with all of these. They're a lot of fun. They're the thing you're going to have the most fun playing around with right at first. You can sharpen an image, render, lens flare. You can, let's say you pick lens flare here. What that will do is add a flare as if light directly was coming into your camera lens. And it gives you the ability to affect how it happens, and I'll click OK with this, and you'll see what this has done. It's another little fun little filter that you're going to want to play around with. Back up here in filters, just familiarize yourself with all of these. You'll have a good time with it. There are different textures. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with filters. View, you can zoom in and zoom out on a picture. You can fit it on the screen, show the actual pixels, which again, when you start to understand pixels and resolution, that will make more sense. The print size you can set. The extras I'll get into in just a second, and rulers if you want rulers on the side of your page here. All of these are different options. Window gives you the opportunity to show all of these different palettes. These palettes I'm not going to get into in depth right now, but they're all over here, and they pop on and off. You can choose which ones by clicking on that window up there. You can pop on and off and decide which ones of these you want to show and which ones you don't. Right up there. Right down here, the tolerance, little bar right here. The tolerance bar is if you're selecting a color. Let's say I'm using my magic wand tool that we went over in part 1. The tolerance, again, if you set it for really, really small, let's change it to 5. I'm going to select a particular area, like right here. It's selected. It did this color. It's selected in a small area. Right where there are little tiny changes, it's going to stop selecting in that area. But let's say I go to 55 instead, which is a much larger number, and I select here. Look at the area. It selected a much larger area. It was more tolerant of variations in the color where you clicked. It's going to click and select the color right here, and it's going to keep expanding and selecting all the color until it runs to an edge, and that's when, or a color change, and here's where you see how it gets darker right here on our cheek, so it stopped selecting there. That's what the tolerance is. It selects how aggressive you want your selection tools to be. And anti-alias and contiguous, don't worry about these things right now. And help, help's pretty self-explanatory. Right here, help is pretty self-explanatory. I think that's a pretty good basic tour of Photoshop, just to let you know it's not going to bite you, it's not going to hurt you. I will cover one more thing. I did forget this. Adobe Bridge, if you have one of the later versions of Photoshop, if you click on it, it's basically, and I'm going to go very, very basic here, it's a file browser. Just a way you can look into your different pictures here on a browser. You can open it up, and it gives you the thumbnails of different images. And that is that. That is a very basic introduction to Photoshop. This is part 2 of the 2-part series. I hope this has helped you at least not be quite so intimidated by Photoshop. It's really not intimidating. It's a lot of fun, and we hope you have a good time with it. Thanks a lot for listening to this Fusion Extreme Photoshop tutorial.